Hey everybody, the Sliders community. So I'm here today to talk to you about how I think Hollywood should really adapt solo episodes of Sliders and turn them into their own standalone television series, or probably at least a movie. But better, a television series because you can explore it a whole lot more. So, there's a lot of good things about Sliders, and one of the things is the storytelling. And a lot of episodes are really, really, really good. And there are some that are just okay. And then there are some that just suck. But being a show back in the 90s, they was really on to something. The writers really took their time and were very creative, thinking of like past shows, reading things in articles and newspapers and magazines and like books and whatever. They really brought something to the table, and that was entertainment. And you know, I've said this before, there's been a couple of shows that have been similar to episodes in Sliders. And, Sliders at times have either predicted the future or almost predicted the future. And so it's kind of like we're living in an age now where television has changed completely. Fewer shows on television, they really don't make DVDs no more, and just about everything is on streaming. But then of course it doesn't always stay on those platforms for very long. And television shows used to be anywhere between like 20 episodes or more per season, and now they're dwindled down to 6, 8, 10, and 13, taking a very European approach to it. Well, I don't live in no European. I live over here in the North American continent. And I miss the good old days of 20-something TV episodes. But that's a story for like another time. Needless to say, I miss spending about 5 months watching a really good television show as opposed to about 2 or just a day. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. There are some episodes of Sliders that are just so good, so juicy, that it really just makes you think. And it makes you think, why hasn't Hollywood hopped on that train yet? And so I wanted to point out certain episodes in the series that I think will make a splendid like television series on a streaming platform. Now, there have been some that have mimicked the episodes, and I'll name those in the honorable mention in the very beginning of the video after I'm done talking with the intro. And no, I'm not saying that, the shows that are similar to what I'm about to describe, they saw Sliders and been like, hey, let me copy this episode. Because two minds think alike, you know what I'm saying? Or two great minds think alike, whatever that phrase is. Now, I have a certain taste of television. And so there might be some episodes that have been adapted into standalone television series that I am unfamiliar with. If that is the case, hey, chime in the comment section and let me know. And so I'm not talking about like episodes like say on Black Mirror, which I never technically watched Black Mirror. I ain't talking about episodic type stuff. I'm talking about full length, like, season after season television show of the same topic. So with that said, here are some honorable mentions. Fever. Fever was a really good episode in the first season. Basically, it dealt with a plague that took out for the most part, San Francisco, I know, but probably reached a little bit further than that. And so, the Sliders went to that world, and on this world there was no like medication. There was herbal stuff, but there was no penicillin. Something that was like, needed back in like, hundreds of thousands of years ago, or whenever it was created, whatever. People died from like the flu back in the day. And so with that, the professor had to make penicillin and give it to people because they thought, oh, mold is germ. So they never thought about making it into medicine. Well, there's a show very similar to that. It's called Contagion. And that was a CW show that was a limited series, but it never got a second season. And I pretty much really enjoyed that show. It dealt with like a virus that was, that the CDC head person let leak out into like, the world. And then they blamed it on like another country, and they had to quarantine this one area of the city. And many people tried to get in and many people tried to get out because of their loved ones and stuff. I think it was a really good, like, dramatic show. It was a remake of, I think, what was that country's name? I forget. It's not Germany. I want to say, no, it's not Czechoslovakia. No, it's not that. I can't think of the name of the country, but it's based on like a show from like another country. So there's really no need in making like a show about that since it's already been made. And there's been movies, similar to that. Love Gods from season 2. Love Gods is a really good episode where Australia and America was at war. They created a super virus and it killed the Y chromosome, killing off men. There's only a few handful of men left, and they put them in these breeder camps against their will. And there's a show that's actually similar to that. It's called Creamery, and I talked about that briefly. It's on Hulu. It's a New Zealand show. They're in their second season, and they're about to have their third because it's been renewed for a third. But, they're very tight-lipped on their shows overseas and about production and stuff like that. Like, they don't let no leaks come out. Unlike American shows and stuff. And so the actresses that been working on it, they've been tight-lipped and haven't mentioned anything about the third season, if it's still having the third season. But basically, it's a comedy drama. Now, the comedy might not be for everybody because it is a New Zealand show. So it's like, different than like American comedy. It's more like slapstick, kind of like European almost and everything. But it is a kind of interesting show. The second season, the first one was more comedy. Second had a little bit more like drama and seriousness and stuff. World Killer is another like show that has somewhat been adapted before. There was this one show on FX called, I think, what was it called? Why the Last Man or some crap like that. I'm not really sure, but like, I tried to get into that show. I couldn't get into it. I could only watch like one episode, two maybe. It got canceled after one season. Also, I Am Legend is kind of like that, where it's like, there's really just one person wandering like, the world, and and then they find some other people. But in that show, they also have like some females that are, I think men also died in that world as well. So it's kind of similar to Love Gods as well. The pilot. So basically in the pilot, they jump from like different worlds, but one world they live in, America is ruled by that of Russia, and Americans are very oppressed and everything. And it's a new world order. Well, there's a show on Amazon called The Man in the High Castle. I think I briefly mentioned that before. Basically, in that world, they also deal in parallel worlds, and some people travel to those parallel worlds. But in the world, the show mainly focus on is where Germany won World War II. And Japan and Germans ruled out of America. The Germans rule most of it, and the Japanese rule only the Pacific area of like California. There's a neutral zone. That way anybody can live with and be free from those people. And, it is a very fascinating and disturbing show. So anybody who wants to salute like German, what's, and and probably think the world would have been better off with them, boy, you are sadly mistaken. These people did not play in this show. And the scariest people in this show are not the Germans, it was the Japanese and everything. I'm like, holy crap. Like, I couldn't believe it and stuff. Plus, I didn't even know Japan was allied with Germany back in those days. So that's like a history lesson they never taught me in school. And so, in that show, there's a group of freedom fighters who are trying to stop the oppression of like the Germans and the Japanese because they have hope because of the tapes they saw from parallel worlds where America and their allies defeated Germany and stuff. So because of that, they started a revolution. The only real problem with the show is two things. First thing is the main character of the show. I have not found nobody who likes that woman. Everybody hates her because of the choices and the mistakes she makes in the show. And it's just kind of like, why would you make your main protagonist so unlikable? Then there is the last season. Nothing in season 4 makes a lick of sense, especially that of the ending. The Young and Relentless. So, this episode has kind of been done before. See, what it is that this was an episode in season 2. And young people actually rule like America while the older people were treated as second-rate citizens. And basically, it's teenagers and people in their 20s who run like corporations and stuff like that. And like all the older people are just treated like their infants, has to stay home. They feel like they have no rights, they're treated badly. I don't know if this could really translate well into its own television show. However, there was a television show a good couple of years ago. I forget how many, and it was on Netflix. I don't think it was an American show. I think it was a Canadian show. But it starred or co-starred Jeanette McCurdy from iCarly. And the show was called Between, and it only lasted for 2 seasons. And basically, for some unbeknownst reason, this one town and this one town only, if you was over the age of 18, you suddenly just died. So all the adults are dead, and the surrounding cities, the people in the surrounding cities could not enter. So it was just a town full of kids. And is in the second season, it was revealed to be some type of government conspiracy, and I think it was something the government had created that they couldn't control, and it just affected that one town. And in the show, you see these kids and these teenagers trying to deal with society, trying to be responsible, while other ones are being like buck wild and everything. It only lasted for 2 seasons. It was not a very good show. Like, it's a show I would never recommend to people. Now, the premise is kind of similar to that of Slider episode, but not really. But it still deals with young people taking on the responsibility of adults. And it's one of those shows that really disappointed me because it's kind of like, I invested so many hours watching 2 seasons of this crap. And it's just kind of like the premise was good. It was okay, but it just didn't hit the nail. You know what I'm saying? And it's one of those shows that when it got canceled, they didn't even let nobody know it got canceled. The stars of the show didn't even know. Years passed by and there was never no confirmation. So everybody just went their own way. Invasion. So with the invasion, that is pretty much similar to a show called Earth Final Conflict. I've never watched Earth Final Conflict. I wasn't really into sci-fi back then, unless it was Star Trek or like Sliders. But so something like that has already been done. And in this show, or this episode, I should say, the Cro-Mags came to parallel worlds and took them over, and they're like the ruling class and stuff like that. Rules of the game. So basically, this has already been done in the Hunger Games. Basically, it's a world where it's like a reality show and you have to fight to the death in order to get the prize and stuff. So that's already been done. But then again, this is the third season, so a lot of stuff in the third season was based on like movies and stuff like that. Soul Survivor, I mean, come on, it's been like a million zombie shows, so that's been done. Stoker, vampire stuff has been done before, so let's move on. So shows I think they should make, at least for a limited series in this one particular episode, is Last Days. It's in season 1. And basically, there's a asteroid or a meteorite or something like that. I think it's an asteroid that's about to hit the Earth and everything where California is at. And because of that, they're about to have another extinction just like the dinosaurs and stuff. So people are scrambling trying to figure out what they can do, but there's nothing they can do really. So everybody's just partying up, living their lives until they die. Until the sliders come in and be all like, yo, why don't you nuke that thing? And they're all like, well, we don't have nukes because Einstein failed in his experiment. But it turned out that he just faked his experiment because he didn't want to have to deal with the aftermath of creating nukes and stuff. I think it'll be a very, very, very fascinating show if you show like a bunch of people who really just can't come up with no solution, and we get to see from different groups and different communities and from different countries how they're gonna live out their last days. Like, are people gonna party it up? Are people just gonna go start like shooting people in the street? Are people just gonna have like a giant orgy or something like that? Or like, are people gonna have like some serious downtime and like connect with their loved ones and forgive them for their past mistakes and everything? Like, there's so many possibilities you can go with that. Eggheads. So this was a world where people value intelligent people more than that of athletes. And when in the beginning of time, thousands of years ago, there was some smart people coming up with stuff. Like, you really take for granted when you go and you like use a stove or like a washer and dryer. It's just kind of like, man, back in those days, they used to like take a bucket of water and soap and just scrub and stuff like that. Like, how the heck did they come up with all these gears and wiry and everything and things that turn, spin things around? Like, they was really smart. And most of the time nowadays, people are just more smart with technology, cell phones, weapons for like government and stuff like that, and computers. You don't see people really inventing stuff like they used to back in the day. So this would be kind of neat if we saw a show like this where smart people are just like high society and everybody else like jocks and everything are just like minorities of the country. And we get to see like the smart people be rude to the popular people and stuff like that. Like, that would just be so fascinating. It's kind of like a reverse Revenge of the Nerds type thing, where it's just you see some of the most dorkiest looking people on screen and they're like the most coolest and everything. The weaker sex. So this was an episode where the sliders went to a world that's controlled by women, and men are like at the bottom of the food chain. And I always like those flip the script type episodes to where you just really don't think about stuff, and it really makes you wonder how the world would be if things were like differently and stuff. And so, because a lot of men have really messed this world up and they're continuing to mess this world up. And some people have wondered, could a woman do any better? Like I said before, I think the first maybe maybe I don't know, like decade, probably. But then after a while, the women are gonna start turning into exactly like the men because people are people. It doesn't matter what gender you are, people are gonna do some wicked stuff. And it's kind of a show that's kind of like that, but not really. There was a show on Amazon called Power. I've mentioned this before. In that show, women for some reason develop like an extra ability that men do not have. They have the ability to create electrical pulses that shoot out from their hands, and they can like zap you and everything. Because of this, women started to revolt, and it started to scare the men. But they didn't go as far as the women ruling the entire world. And I'm pretty sure that the show got canceled because there hasn't been another season since. Obsession. So this was a world that had psychics, like real life psychics, who could predict like the future and read your mind and your thoughts, and like they can look with their mind and see what's wrong with your body and like fix it and stuff like that. And they could prevent like certain people's murders. So it will be neat to see a show where people like Martin Luther King, Elvis, JFK were like still alive, and they worked with some of the most important people in like the world to try to prevent things. While all like you can also have the show to where there are people who do not like psychics, and because they don't like the idea of having their minds read. So it could be a really good like political type show to where or debatable type show where it's like these people have an important gift, but it's an invasion of one's mind. As time goes by, now there's a lot of different plots that goes on with this, but the one that is kind of fascinating is like the fact that in America, Americans are the ones getting deported and not immigrants. And so who rules America? The Spanish and stuff. And when you get deported, you go off to Canada. And it's really interesting, but it will play too close to what's going on in the country now. Because one thing a lot of people don't really like that much is when real life politics start to like bleed over into television series, because they're kind of like, hey, I have to live through this. Why do I want to watch this for like escapism? But if this was done at any other point in time, I think it would have made for a fascinating show. Double cross is where in a world they have very few resources and they go to parallel worlds where they want to and steal from their resources. Now, they have to have brownouts and stuff, and they have to have this type of weird looking food that they have to eat for nutrients because they don't have that much stuff. Technically, there are kind of shows like this already, mostly like zombie shows or like post-apocalyptic shows, but never to this extent. And it would be fascinating to see how people have to like adjust their life to, um, not having as many resources as they used to before. Luck of the draw. Basically, this is where they do natural selection. Basically, there's so many people in the world that they don't have enough resources, so they kill people. But before they do, they give you the time of your life for about a week, and then they offer you, and then the money that you win goes to that of your family. And there's a group of people who thinks this is wrong and they try to prevent it. That would be very fascinating. Because of course the solution is stop making babies. And everything. Like there won't be that many people populating the world if there weren't so many people clickety clacking. And so like but it would be interesting if, like, just say for whatever reason, there's just tons of people and they have to do natural selection. We'll get to spend time with these group of people and, like, see what makes them click and everything. And you really build, like, a bond with them to where you don't want that character to die. And then of course there're going to be people who are going to try to prevent it. So what do you do? Do you follow the law, or do you break it and start a revolution? Profits and loss. So in this world, they are very religious on this world, right? And the religious people is all like, you pay this much money, you do this holy stuff, and then we're gonna put you in this machine, and you're gonna transcend to the other world and be happier and blah blah. And it's really just a con. All it is that they kill you, they fry you in an incinerator type thing. I think it would be fascinating to see just how far a religious cult could go in the show, to where it's mandatory to go to this type of religious church and do this stuff, but then deep down inside they're sacrificing you for whatever reason. And one of the most touching thing was when that one dude's all he's been a part of this, but he just can't do it no more. He can't see more loved ones losing their life, knowing he's sending them to their graves and stuff. California Reich. This was a very, very intense episode that deals with racism in the 4th season. Basically, what it is that they voted for a candidate that only wanted white people in America and white people only. So the people of color got deported and put in these concentration type camps or turned into eddies. And the thing is, it didn't even matter if these people of color were born in America or not. It teaches people the value that your vote does matter and that racism still exists. A premise like this would be great for flipping the script, showing people the true reality and harshness of racism and oppression and stuff. And I still believe, what I said a long time ago, is that I'm surprised Sliders didn't flip the script a lot more with this episode. And instead of having whites rule over everything, it could have been people of color, and then the white people could have been the ones oppressed and put in those camps, because then it really makes people think, you know what I'm saying? And this is what episodes like this are supposed to do. They're supposed to make people think, because there are still tons of racist people in the world, and then there are tons of people who are not racist, but then there are also tons of people who just when they see bad stuff happening to people of color, they're just whatever, and turn their head, or they do absolutely nothing, or they think, oh, well, just my ancestors, why should I care, and stuff like that. And then there's My Brother's Keeper, a very profound episode where it's a minority group that, do you consider them human or not? They're clones. Basically, it's a rich society, and whenever they need an organ to be replaced, they just clone themselves, and then they take the organ from that clone and they dispose of that clone. This started a rebellion to where many of the clones started fighting back. It's really that 1%, but do you even consider them true, living beings and stuff? It kind of reminds me of Star Trek: The Next Generation, A Measure of a Man. Does this thing that you created in the lab, does it have the same rights as a person who was born biological in the world and everything? And that would make for a very fascinating television show. And if they didn't want to go the clone route, then they can just do it with the poor and everything. So Sliders had a bunch of good episodes, but I just feel these episodes particular were the icing on the cake that many studios would like to make nowadays. Some of them already have. And I'm surprised that many other ones have not.